What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Week 3 players to sell high on. In this video, I'll be going over some players that you might want to be trading away from your team because their current market value is higher than it should be. Remember what I said last week about being smart though. You're far more likely to get a deal done if you target players on teams with obvious needs. You're not going to get a trade accepted if you're offering Darren Waller to a Kelsey owner. They don't care about Darren Waller. You got to be offering Darren Waller to someone who's in need of a tight end. Maybe someone with Jared Cook, for instance. So even if the players involved in the trade are fair, every trade offer needs to make sense for both parties because nothing's more annoying than getting just ridiculous trade offers that don't benefit your team. So with that being said, let's start things off like I said we would, with Mark Ingram. It just makes too much sense to trade away Mark Ingram right now. The Ravens lead the league in plays run with 72.5 per week. But that's really only because they've played in the 2 best possible matchups. They're not actually a team that wants to run 72.5 plays every week. They decimated a trash Dolphins club, and then they got a home matchup against the fast-paced Cardinals. People seem to think going into last week that Ingram was going to get a bunch more touches if the game were close. So like, well, Nick, it was just a blowout. That's why he didn't get any touches. Okay, yeah, he had more. He went from 14 to 15. And like I said last week, if he doesn't score a touchdown, he's going to disappoint in fantasy. Well, he didn't score, and he only managed 9.7 full PPR points in the second best possible matchup. The Ravens aren't going to run 72.5 plays per game moving forward, which means he might not even see his 14 to 15 total touches that he's seeing right now. I don't see any sort of rationale for not wanting to trade him away while you still can. The next player you should be trading away is Josh Jacobs. He's currently the running back 7 in half PPR leagues, and that's mainly due to his 2 rushing touchdowns. His actual production doesn't warrant the running back 7 overall. Here's the problem with Jacobs. I thought going into last week, and I'm sure many of you did as well, that maybe, just maybe, the lack of receiving volume in week 1 was due to the game script. They had the lead for a good chunk of the game, so they preferred to use him as a rusher late in the game to drain the clock. And that makes sense, right? You have the lead, you think you can win, you're at home, give the ball to Jacobs, he's doing really well. We don't need to involve him in the receiving game, just use him as a rusher. So Jalen Rashard ended up playing 9 snaps in week 1 and only saw 1 carry and 0 targets. To me, seeing them throw just 1 target to all of their running backs combined in week 1 was more about that game than their plans for the entire season. But then it happened again this week in an entirely different game script. Jalen Rashard was bumped up to 17 offensive snaps, saw 3 targets, while Jacobs saw 10 fewer offensive snaps and 0 targets. That gives him just 1 more target on the season than you and I have. And since the Raiders don't project to be winning all that many weeks, that's very concerning. They also have now played in 2 home games, meaning they only have 6 more for the rest of the season. And then you look at who they play over the next month: at Vikings, at Colts, home against the Bears, and then at Packers against a much improved Packers defense. There are 3 brutal matchups in there, so I don't expect him to hold his 5.3 yards per carry, and if he's not getting any targets either, then there's no way in the world he's going to return value at his current ranking. So I'd definitely be looking to trade him if you have him. And honestly, that's it for the running back position. I would put Mostert here because he's obviously not going to finish as a mid-running back 2, but realistically, you're not going to get any sort of value trying to trade him away. No one's going to give you anything. I just think the big thing with running back trades is just targeting a team that needs one badly. If someone has really mediocre running back options or they've suffered some injuries at that position, then you won't need to sell high on a player because all of your running backs will have higher value to them. So if you've got, 4 or 5 options that you really like, you don't need to sell high, just pick the one you like the least and try and upgrade somewhere else, sending them to a team that needs running back. At wide receiver, we'll start things off with Tyler Boyd. Now, Tyler hasn't been lucky in the touchdown department, hasn't even scored one yet this season, but nothing about his stats points to him having a great year. And that's without even considering AJ Green's return. He ranks 11th in receiving yards and 2nd in receptions, which is great, but he's 48th in air yards and has the 4th lowest ADOT among any player with at least 12 targets. All of the air yards have been going to John Ross. So Boyd has been operating extremely close to the line of scrimmage, and while that's going to help him in his reception totals and having a high catch rate, it really caps his upside and really limits his touchdown ceiling. And when Green returns, there are going to be far fewer targets to go around. So instead of getting 11 low upside targets each week, well, he's going to be moved to more like 7 or 8 low upside targets. And so he'll go from 8 or 9 receptions for like 80 or so yards to maybe 5 or 6 receptions for more like 50 yards. And the already limited touchdown ceiling is going to be reduced even more. So I'd definitely be looking to trade him while he's still 2nd in receptions, because he might end up being the 3rd receiver on the Bengals in a month or so, and his value is way higher than that right now. Next, we have Emmanuel Sanders. Now, Sanders is currently 4th among all wide receivers in half PPR points per game, largely thanks to his monster 11 for 98 in a touchdown game against the Bears on Sunday. But his stats also point to regression coming soon. He has fewer air yards than receiving yards, ranking 13th in receiving yards, but 37th in air yards. He also has an extremely low ADOT of 8.2 yards, lower than any player with at least 150 air yards. So the targets are great and the touchdowns are great, but the majority of his targets are still low value, and we can't expect him to finish with the 160 targets he's on pace for, given that the most he's ever seen was 5 years ago at 141. He's still a nice guy to have on your team, but he's not going to finish anywhere close to the wide receiver 4, and he has enough name recognition for where some people are going to think that he can. So trade him while he's still the wide receiver 4. The last wide receiver for today is T.Y. Hilton. I included him last week, but he scored another touchdown, so his value is still too high. He's currently the wide receiver 7, and that's a bit unsustainable given his volume. He has an 80% completion percentage when targeted, which is going to drop. He's not going to stay that high. He ranks 50th in air yards with an extremely low ADOT, and he has 3 touchdowns through 2 weeks, despite never having more than 7 in a season, even when he was playing with Andrew Luck at quarterback. His current volume is more in line with like a low-end wide receiver 2, which, to be fair, is probably equal to or better than where you drafted him. So if you want to hold on to him, then I get it. Like, he's a value for where you took him. But the touchdowns are going to start dropping soon, and he's just not getting enough volume to make up for it when that starts happening. So I'd look to move him before people start to realize that. At tight end, you have a few options this week. You probably missed the chance to trade Hooper if you didn't trade him last week, but he is still an option. He ranks 8th in receiving yards among tight ends, despite ranking 12th in air yards with a pathetic, honestly, 4.8 ADOT. So his upside is extremely capped. You know, they don't throw the ball to him deep downfield. It's not like he has a really good red zone role. So you're just looking for the games where he's getting you 7 for 70, and that's just really tough to rely on him at that point. The big one this week would have been Vance Mcdonald, the air yards model, which you can see at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. It has him as the top overperformer this week. He caught 7 balls for 38 yards and 2 touchdowns, despite seeing just 12 total air yards with an average depth of target of 1.7 yards. He's just not being used deep downfield, so he's unusable if he doesn't score a touchdown. And the problem is that Big Ben's out for the year now, so I doubt really anyone's going to give you much value for him, which stinks because his value was already too high when Big Ben was in there. So if Big Ben hadn't gotten hurt, he'd definitely be a guy you want to trade away, and people would probably go for it because they see Big Ben at quarterback. They know that he was hyped up this offseason. They might have done the trade. But now without Big Ben, I really don't know if anyone's going to complete this for you. So you're going to have to target a team that needs a tight end, and you're probably going to have to throw something in as well, which is fine to do. Take Vance McDonald. Take a running back that is maybe on your bench, maybe you're running back 4, and try and get a slight upgrade at wide receiver or something to help your team. But I don't think Vance McDonald is really worth starting anymore because they're just not using him with any sort of high upside targets. Sure, he scored the 2 touchdowns, but if he doesn't score, he will be a disappointment. I know you can say that about a lot of tight ends, but listen, 1.7 average depth of target is far too low. There are other options than Vance McDonald, and his name recognition and being on the Steelers is going to help him elevate it just a little bit more than what he's worth. That's really it for tight end. You could make the case for Darren Waller. His stats aren't extremely promising going forward, but I want to see one more week of how they use him. I just want one more week of statistics to come in before I recommend trading him away. Just know that what we've seen so far, sure, the targets are there, the snaps are there, but it's slightly concerning where these targets are on the field and how high of the upside these targets are. So just note that in the back of your mind. I'm not saying trade him away, but no, you're definitely not trading for him, and it's very possible he makes it onto this video next week. At quarterback, you guys kind of know the drill. Quarterback trades don't really get done, but if you are involved in one, you better be the side trading away a quarterback because there are always options on free agency, and the gap between a low-end 1 and a high-end, a mid-end, a low-end 2, there's just nothing there. It's like a point per game. If you are looking to trade someone away, then I highly doubt that Keenum, Stafford, and Wilson are all going to keep up their quarterback 1 rankings, and Mariota is a very high-end 2 right now. I believe like the 13th or 14th quarterback, kind of depending on how you do your scoring. Don't think he's going to continue that moving forward. So those are some names that if you do own them, you can be looking to trade away for a team in need of a quarterback. Maybe there's someone out there that has Winston, that has Newton, and they're like, hey, I need an upgrade. Those are some guys you could try to trade to them and maybe get something for it. So those are the players you should be looking to trade away before week 3 because their market value is higher than it will be in the near future. Remember, you can't just send random trade offers to teams. Look around your league for teams in need of a certain position and figure out a trade that could benefit the both of you. Also remember that these are players that are being overvalued, but you don't need to dominate every trade. The best trades are the ones that benefit both teams. And if you want to see a larger list of players that overperform this week that maybe you can include in some trades, then check that out at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But that's the end of this one. I hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new here, how about subscribing to the channel? But thanks for watching.